Hey guys, Cecil here once again. As you can tell by the title of this video, I'm going to be starting a series called In Defense Of. Now this isn't going to be a consecutive series or anything, this is going to be a once in a while kind of video that's going to kind of take a look through gaming history and find controllers and accessories and things like that and really analyze them and say, hey, does this controller or does this game really deserve the amount of flack it's taken over the years? Are there some better points to it? You know, is there more merit to it than it's gotten? Now, I'm going to be taking a look at the Sega Saturn 3D controller, which I'm going to show here in a minute or so, and explain why it's taken a lot of the flack, why I like it, and I'll compare it to a lot of the other Saturn controllers and other controllers out there, and just kind of give my impressions and thoughts as to why I really do like it quite a bit. So why don't we go take a look at that right now?
Okay guys, here it is. This is the Sega Saturn 3D controller if you've never seen one before. Definitely kind of a unique design to say the least. Now Sega came out with this controller for two reasons. One, it was going to be the pack-in for this wonderful game right here called Nights into Dreams. This was kind of Sega's, hope to be the next Sonic the Hedgehog. It was developed by Sonic Team, and it definitely was a very good game for the time. Some people aren't big fans of it. They think it's overrated. I personally really enjoy it, and the only real way to play it is with this controller. When this came out, I forget how much this package MSRP'd for. I think it was around $70. I could be wrong, but yeah, this was definitely a great thing to have, and trying to play this game with with a D-pad, it just doesn't work very well. The other reason Sega came out with this controller was more or less a response to the N64 controller. Now in June 1996, the N64 came out in Japan, and the big addition to that controller was the analog stick. The original Sega Saturn controller did not have one. This controller added more or less an analog, I wouldn't say stick so much, as more of kind of a circular nub. Now, the reason this controller takes so much flack, at least from all the videos and impressions and things like that, is mainly kind of just, as I said before, kind of an awkward design. It's a little weird to hold at first, but in my opinion, once you get used to it, and if you're a guy and you've got, decent sized hands, it's definitely quite comfortable. Now, the D-pad on here, I love this D-pad. This is my favorite D-pad Sega ever did. For fighting games like, say, Street Fighter 03 or, X-Men vs. Street Fighter, to do all your sweeps, you could not ask for a better D-pad than this. The face buttons, it's got 6 nice, universally sized face buttons. The start button is pretty standard, just a circular button. You can switch it here between, 3D controller mode and just standard, D-pad mode. It basically, when you have it in D-pad mode, it just kind of shuts the analog stick off. It also has your pretty standard these days L and R triggers on the sides. Now, a cool feature of this controller that Sega really never utilized, or at least I think that what they would have done, is there's this little switch up here. If you push it down, you can pop off the controller cable, and it kind of exposes this little expansion port. Now, maybe Sega was planning on doing something. I don't know specifically what the plan was forever for this, but my guess is a rumble pack or something would have popped on here, and then once you connected that rumble pack, you would have just slid the controller cable back on, and it would have given the 3D controller rumble support. Something that's a standard Saturn pad, which is this controller right here, never would have been able to have. Now this right here is basically the standard Japanese Sega Saturn controller. This is since day one when the Saturn came out in Japan. This was the controller that the Saturn was packed with. It's a very good controller, don't get me wrong. I can understand why a lot of people like it. My biggest gripes with it are the different sized ABC XYZ buttons. These over here on the 3D pad feel a lot more comfortable than these. Plus, these L and R triggers up here don't feel, they don't have a lot of give, and they don't feel quite as responsive as the triggers on the 3D controller. Now, like I said, this was since 1994 when the Saturn launched in Japan. This is known as this Japanese Sega Saturn controller that was always been the standard controller in Japan. When the Saturn launched in the US, we didn't get this controller initially. This didn't come out till about a year after the Saturn launched and started getting packed in with that system. Initially, when we got the Saturn, we got this pile of crap right here, which was known as the US Sega Saturn controller. Now, I cannot tell you how much I absolutely loathe this controller. When I initially got my Saturn a couple months after it launched, I despised this thing. if you've ever, if you're familiar with like ergonomic keyboards, and they have like the buttons on one side and one on the other side, and it's kind of got that space in the middle. I hate those kind of keyboards, and this is what that controller reminds me of. It's got this kind of oddball, circular-like D-pad that just does not feel right at all. The face buttons for XYZ, ABC are even worse than what they are on the Saturn, or excuse me, the Japanese Saturn pad. The L and R triggers are just, it's like just pushing plastic. There's like, at least the Japanese Saturn pad had a little bit of give. These guys got absolutely nothing. And like I said, if I have a choice, with any controller, this thing usually gets tossed out the wall. I hate this thing. I much prefer the 3D controller and even the Japanese Saturn pad over this pile of shit. So Sega basically took this 3D controller design and they came up later with the Dreamcast, the Sega Saturn or Sega Dreamcast controller. You can definitely tell there's definite similarities between this and this. Now, I personally prefer this much more than the Dreamcast controller. The only real advantage, in my opinion, the Dreamcast controller has over this is kind of the analog stick. It's definitely better than I would say the analog, nub that the 3D controller has, but otherwise, this thing trumps it in every facet almost. The 6 face buttons instead of 4. Sega kind of went with a 4 face button design with this, and for, like I said, a fighting game fan, at least myself, that was a killer. The L and R triggers are about the same. My biggest gripe with the Dreamcast controller, well, besides the controller controller cable sticking out the bottom, which is a pain in the ass, is the D-pad. Now, it's not bad, but I'm sure if people have played fighting games with this thing on the Dreamcast, and you are using the D-pad, if you're trying to do like sweeps in Street Fighter or Marvel vs. Capcom 2, this D-pad is very rough on the edges. After a while, it can really make your thumb raw. It's just not a comfortable controller for fighting games and games in general that really require fast movements on the D-pad. Frankly, these days, if I play fighting games on the Dreamcast, I use an arcade stick. I don't even really use this one anymore. The D-pad on the 3D controller is just so much more comfortable, just feels much, much more responsive than this thing. And just, other than the fact you can also do it added a rumble pack, and you can put the VMU in here, which was kind of a neat thing. But just for controller versus controller, just general function, give me this one any day of the week. This thing's like, get rid of it. It's not bad, though. I don't mind the Dreamcast controller so much. I just think they definitely should have taken more design from this and, put more of this into this versus, kind of try to make it more like a PlayStation controller. So yeah, that's basically the 3D controller. Like I said, I can understand why some people might not be a big fan of this. It is a little awkward at first, but if you really give it a chance, I think ultimately you will prefer this controller over any other, controller on the Saturn. A lot of the games that after the Knights came out in '96, first-party Sega games on the Saturn supported this. Some games, even though it might not have the little icon on the back of the cases where it says 3D controller support, it still will work with this. And, a game like Panzer Dragoon, it actually doesn't work too bad. So yeah, that's the Saturn 3D controller.
So yeah, there you go. That's pretty much the Sega Saturn 3D controller in a nutshell. Overall, like I said, it's a really good controller. They're not very expensive these days. Pretty much any Saturn controller isn't going to run you more than probably $10. So if you're looking at getting a Saturn, or if you just got a standard controller and you're looking to get a second controller, track down a 3D controller, give it a try, see what you think. So yeah, give me your thoughts on the 3D controller, or a Sega controller in general. Which one's your favorite? Which one do you hate the most? Things like that. Feel free to leave a comment down below, or make a video response. I'm definitely always interested in hearing people's thoughts on things like this. As far as my next video, I'm going to be looking at a couple of different games in a series. It's just a 2-game series, if you even want to really call it a series. The first game in this series was released on both the PlayStation and the Saturn relatively early in the 32-bit era. My friends and I have played it, a little bit in the past when we've gotten together on occasion. Nothing really in depth. It's very unique, to say the least. I'm sure most people out there probably have never even heard of it. And then later on in a video after that, I'm going to be looking at the sequel that was kind of just rushed out there. I never even knew it existed until I saw it at a used game store a few years ago one day. It was only ever released on the PlayStation really late in the PlayStation's life, and I'm like, holy cow, this game got a sequel? I had no idea. But that's another subject for another video. So again, thank you for watching. I really hope you enjoyed these videos. I'm definitely, like I said, going to keep them coming. Again, feel free to comment, subscribe, whatever you want to do. You know, I'm always, again, looking for feedback, how I can make my videos better, worse, things like that. So you guys have a good day. Take it easy. I'll see you next time.